Hello everyone, I will be explaining how to solve coding problem 4.4.2. This problem describes a new file type that conforms to the following structure. Each row is comprised of a number representing the assignment number, an assignment name, a grade, a total representing the total possible points for this assignment, and a weight representing the assignment's worth. And then each of these elements is simply separated by a space. Now, we are tasked with checking whether some file conforms to the following rules. Each line has 5 elements separated by spaces. The first, third, and fourth elements are integers. The fifth element is a decimal. And lastly, that all the fifth elements add up to 1. If all of the above rules check out, then we know that we have a properly formatted .cs1301 file, and we can return true. Otherwise, should one of these rules fail, we will return false. So let's start this problem. From the print statements down below, we know that we need to call our function format checker. So let's begin with that. We're going to have def format checker, and then we need to get a parameter. This parameter is simply going to be the file name that we're going to pass into our function. So for this problem, we know that we need to check whether or not the contents of a file conform to the standards that I stated before. So this means that we need to read from the file instead of write to it. So we're going to start off with that. I'm going to have my file variable, and that's going to be equal to file. We're going to pass in the file name because this is what we want to read, and then we're going to give it the R to let it know that we're going to open file name for reading. Note that R is not needed in this case, but I like to put it just to be explicit. So now we have 3 options as to how we can read from this file. We have read, which would read everything from the file and return us one big long string. We have read line, which would just read one line from the file. Though using this method, we could essentially simulate the process of reading a line one at a time by calling the readLine function multiple times. Or we can use the readLines function, which returns us a list of strings, with each string being one line in the file. This is the format that I like the best, so we're going to go with that. So we're going to have my lines. This is going to be equal to my file dot read lines. So as I stated before, my lines is simply going to contain a list of strings with each string being one line from my file. Now that we are done with my file, we can close it. And remember to always close your files. So now we need to begin iterating through my lines. Here, there's nothing special that we need to do, so we're going to do a simple for loop, for line in my lines. And now we need to figure out how to check whether or not the file conforms to the criteria highlighted above. So let's begin with the first one. We have to check whether each line has 5 elements that are all separated by spaces. So let's split the line variable. And remember, what split does is, based on whatever argument you give the function, it will split the string on that argument. And if we don't give it an argument, then it's just going to split it on the space. And we want to check on spaces, so that is perfect for us. So here I have line elements, and that is going to be equal to line.split. So now we have a list with each element being some string that has been split on the space. So now we need to check whether or not line elements has 5 elements. And we know that should the length of line elements be not equal to 5, then we can return false right then and there, and then the function will stop. So if length of line elements is not equal to 5, then we return false. And then this structure right here is essentially how we're going to try to solve all the criteria that we have listed above. We're going to return false as soon as something goes awry, and then otherwise, should we be able to iterate through all the lines and everything checks out, then we'll return true at the very end. So now we need to tackle the second criteria, where the first, third, and fourth elements are integers. In order to solve this one, we can't simply have an if statement that checks whether or not we can successfully convert a string into an integer. So what we need to do instead is have a try except. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to convert the proper elements to be integers. So here we're checking to see whether or not we can convert line elements at 0, which corresponds to the first element, into an integer. And if we can, we're going to give it the variable name, and then we're going to do the same thing for the third and fourth elements. The third element corresponds to the grade, so we're going to do grade is equal to int of line elements, and then at 2, and then lastly, total is equal to int of line elements at 3. So, if y'all remember, the way the try except is going to work is as long as the try is good, then we are not going to reach the except. But should something in the try result in an error, then we go into the except clause. So, what this means is, should one of these conversions result in an error, then we're going to go into except, and here we're simply going to return false, because we know that we were not able to convert something into an integer, so we failed the second criteria. Now we can do the same thing for the third criteria. We need to convert the string for the fifth element into a decimal. So the last element is a weight, and so weight is equal to float of line elements at 4. And if this is successful, then that is good for us. Otherwise, it's going to go into the except and return false. So it seems like we have the first 3 done. Now we need to focus on the last one. All the fifth elements add up to 1. So what this criteria is essentially checking is whether or not all the weights that have been given in our file add up to 1, so that we can check whether or not the score is out of 100. So what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to have a total weight variable that I'm going to assign before my for loop. And I'm going to set this to be equal to 0. And now we're going to have to keep track of a running count of the weight that we have summed up so far. So we're simply going to do total weight, and then that is equal to total weight plus weight. So here we're simply keeping track of whatever the total weight is up to the point. And now, after the for loop has finished executing, is when we're going to check whether or not total weight is equal to 1. So here, we'll do the if statement. If total weight is not equal to 1, then we're going to return false. Because we know that we've read all the lines, so we cannot add any more to total weight. And so it has to equal 1 by the end of the for loop. And if it doesn't, then we return false. Otherwise, we can return true, and our function is done. So now let us run this to see whether or not it works. All right, we have run into some issues. Oh, my issue is that I am not opening the file correctly. We need to call open instead of file to actually open the file, and we're going to open it for reading. All right, so we get true and false. Now, so if we look at the instructions, we'll see that It says right now running it on sample 1301 returns true, and running it on test.cs1301 should return false. Now let's submit this for grading and we should be good to go. As you can see, we have successfully completed this assignment.